Waiter insults Elon Musk at a luxury restaurant, but when he discovered the truth you won't believe. What happens when a waiter insults Elon Musk at a luxury restaurant, convinced that no one will call him out? This gripping story takes you aboard a flight that becomes an unexpected battleground against prejudice. From a heated mid-air confrontation to a dramatic courtroom reckoning, witness the consequences of one man's hateful actions and the powerful stand taken against him. Justice is served, resilience triumphs over hate, and a powerful message resonates far beyond the restaurant. You won't believe how it all unfolds. The rain gently tapped against the windows of Lottie Jardin, a quiet yet sophisticated restaurant nestled in the heart of San Francisco. With its cream-colored walls and soft, dim lighting, it offered a peaceful escape from the city's chaos. It was 8:45 in the evening, and the inviting scent of freshly baked bread mingled with hints of herbs and melted butter in the air. Elon Musk rubbed his face, trying to shake off the exhaustion that had built up over the past week. The dark circles under his eyes told the story of sleepless nights spent putting out fires at his companies. His phone buzzed nonstop in the pocket of his worn jeans, but for the first time that day, he decided to ignore it. Just one night, he muttered as he pushed open the heavy wooden door. One night where I'm not Elon Musk. The hostess, a young woman with blonde hair neatly tied in a bun, barely glanced up. His faded jeans and old black sweater didn't match the usual clientele of the restaurant. "Table for one?" she asked, flipping through the reservation book without much interest. "Yes, something away from the windows," he replied, silently grateful that she hadn't recognized him. In the kitchen, Miguel Ramirez polished a wine glass while half listening to his coworkers' complaints. At 35, Miguel had spent most of his life working in restaurants, with the past 5 years at Lottie Jardin being especially tough. "Did you see the guy who just walked in?" asked Sarah, a waitress, as she grabbed an order. "He looks like he got lost on his way to McDonald's." Miguel peeked through the kitchen door at table 15. "Great," he muttered. "Another one who'll order a salad and tap water while hogging the table for 2 hours. The night hadn't been kind to Miguel. Earlier, his mother had called about needing another expensive treatment that her insurance wouldn't cover. His younger sister's college fees were also looming, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him. "By the way, Chef Ost is in a bad mood," Carlos, another waiter, warned as he entered the kitchen. "Someone trashed his filet on Yelp." Miguel sighed, adjusted his apron, and headed to his 6th table of the evening. Though his professional smile was in place, inside, it felt like his world was falling apart. At table 15, Musk pretended to study the menu, but his thoughts were elsewhere: problems at Tesla, another investigation into autopilot safety, scandals on X, and delays at SpaceX. The weight of being the world's most scrutinized man felt unbearable tonight. "Good evening," Miguel's voice broke through his thoughts. "I'm Miguel, your waiter. Can I get you a drink while you look over the menu?" Musk glanced up from his phone, where he just read yet another negative headline about himself. "A whiskey, neat." "Whatever you have," he replied. Miguel raised an eyebrow. This restaurant was famous for its wine list, not its whiskey. "We have Macallan 18-year-old. That's $145 a shot," he said, his tone making it clear that Musk might want to reconsider. "That's fine," Musk murmured, looking back at his phone. Miguel walked away, muttering about customers who didn't appreciate fine dining. At the bar, Sarah smirked. "Table 15 seems like a treat," she teased. Miguel chuckled dryly. "Did you see how he's dressed? This isn't a Denny's." Back at the table, Musk noticed the staff's glances and whispers. He found it oddly amusing. After weeks of being surrounded by people trying to impress him, it felt refreshing to be treated like nobody. The restaurant started to fill up. An impeccably dressed couple celebrating their anniversary sat at a nearby table. At another, a group of tech executives animatedly discussed funding deals. Miguel returned with Musk's whiskey, placing it down carelessly enough that a few drops spilled onto the white tablecloth. "Are you ready to order?" he asked, pen tapping impatiently against his notepad. Musk closed the menu. "What do you recommend?" Miguel's smile tightened. Everything here is excellent. But maybe start with something simple, like the soup of the day? It's more accessible. Musk raised an eyebrow, catching the condescension. I'll have the foie gras to start, he said, mispronouncing it enough to make Miguel wince. And the filet mignon, medium rare. Miguel couldn't help himself. Are you sure? Foie gras isn't for everyone's palate. Musk's calm demeanor seemed to frustrate Miguel further. I'm sure, Musk replied. And bring me a bottle of Chateau Lafite Rothschild 2010. Miguel froze. That's $2,500 a bottle, he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. Perhaps you'd like to reconsider. The bottle will be fine, Musk said without looking up. Miguel walked back to the kitchen, shaking his head. I bet his card gets declined, he told Sarah, who laughed. Remember that guy last month who had to wash dishes to cover his bill? Throughout the evening, Miguel's snide remarks became bolder. When Musk mispronounced Bordeaux, Miguel corrected him sharply. When Musk asked for ketchup with his $120 steak, Miguel almost rolled his eyes. You know, Miguel said while clearing Musk's dessert plate, next time, there's a Burger King nearby. You might feel more at home there. Nearby diners held their breath, expecting Musk to lash out. Instead, he smiled faintly and pulled out his phone, appearing to record something. Outside, the rain grew heavier, thunder rumbling in the distance as if setting the stage for what was about to come. Miguel had no idea his life was about to change forever. For now, he was just another tired waiter, trying to survive another tough night. But in the coming days, Table 15 would become the start of a story the restaurant would never forget. The night was winding down, and Miguel prepared the bill with a mix of anticipation and disdain. The total came to over $3,000, a sum he was convinced would lead to an awkward moment. As he walked toward Table 15, he mentally rehearsed what he'd say when the card was declined. But that climactic moment would have to wait. For now, Miguel was just a waiter who had spent the night treating one of the world's most powerful men with thinly veiled contempt, entirely unaware of his true identity. The atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted subtly. Diners who were previously absorbed in their own conversations now discreetly watched the tension between the arrogant waiter and the seemingly humble customer at Table 15. Excuse me, Musk called out to Miguel as he passed by with a tray of desserts. Could you bring me another whiskey? Miguel sighed loudly enough for nearby diners to hear. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer a glass of water? It's on the house. At a neighboring table, a woman nearly choked on her wine. Her dining companion stifled a laugh, caught between amusement and embarrassment. The whiskey will be fine, Musk replied calmly. Oddly, he seemed to be enjoying the situation. After months of flattery and fear from everyone he encountered, it was refreshing to be treated like an ordinary person, even if it came with scorn. Back in the kitchen, Sarah intercepted Miguel as he prepared the drink. Don't you think you're pushing it a little? She whispered. Though her words suggested concern, her tone carried admiration. Thomas is going to kill you if he hears how you're talking to the customers. Miguel shrugged and poured the whiskey. Did you see how he holds his fork and knife? Like he's never eaten at a fine dining restaurant. And the foie gras? He ordered it just to show off. Didn't even know how to appreciate it. Sarah bit her lip, glancing toward the dining area. Still, there's something about him. He feels familiar. Yeah, Miguel scoffed. He looks like every wannabe tech guy who comes here pretending to be the next Steve Jobs. I'm sure he has a revolutionary startup in his garage. Meanwhile, Chef Ost peeked out from the kitchen, watching the infamous diner at Table 15 with a mix of curiosity and professional outrage. How does someone order Chateau Lafite Rothschild and pair it with ketchup? He muttered in French, shaking his head. It's culinary crime. In the corner of the restaurant, the manager, Thomas, had also been observing the scene with growing unease. Something about the customer tugged at the edges of his memory, like he was missing an important detail. Deciding to intervene, he approached Musk's table with a polished smile. Good evening, sir, Thomas said. Is everything to your liking? Musk glanced up from his phone. Everything's excellent, especially the service. It has a unique touch. Thomas caught the glint of amusement in Musk's eyes, and his unease deepened. I'm glad to hear that. If there's anything you need. Actually, Musk interrupted, could you prepare the chocolate souffle? I noticed it takes about 20 minutes. At that moment, Miguel returned with the whiskey. He placed it on the table and, ignoring Thomas's warning look, added, the souffle is quite sophisticated. Perhaps some ice cream would be more appropriate for your palate? Thomas froze, dreading an angry response. But Musk just smiled. The souffle will be fine, he said calmly. And maybe you can explain what makes it so sophisticated. For the first time that night, Miguel hesitated. The customer's calm demeanor and quiet amusement were starting to unnerve him. At the anniversary table, the husband leaned toward his wife. That guy must be someone important, he whispered. Nobody stays this calm under such terrible service unless they're used to much bigger problems. The woman nodded, discreetly studying Musk. There's something about the way he carries himself. He's no ordinary diner. The rain outside had stopped, but the fogged-up windows added an intimate atmosphere to the restaurant. As the clock struck 10:30 p.m., most diners had left, leaving only a handful of tables occupied. Table 15 remained one of them. Miguel prepared the check, his emotions swinging between confidence and disdain. The total, $3,247.85. It was more than he made in a month. As he approached the table, he replayed the night in his head, every sarcastic comment, every condescending glance. If you need me to explain the numbers, Miguel began, placing the check on the table. That won't be necessary, Musk replied, pulling a sleek black card from his worn wallet. Miguel froze, staring at the card. It was different, heavier, with a minimalist design. For a moment, recognition flickered in his eyes. But the full impact of that recognition would have to wait. For now, Miguel remained a proud waiter who had spent the evening belittling a customer, unaware that his life was about to change forever. The restaurant clock read 10:45 p.m. What had started as an ordinary evening was about to become a story no one in the restaurant would ever forget. As Miguel returned to his routine, his confidence swelled. The restaurant had emptied further, leaving behind a quiet stillness that made every interaction stand out more sharply. Would you like to see the wine list again? Miguel asked Musk, his voice dripping with irony. I can show you the wines by the glass, they're more manageable. Musk, who had been adjusting his phone on the table, smiled slightly. Why don't you surprise me? Something that pairs well with the souffle. The response caught Miguel off guard. It wasn't the defensive reaction he'd been expecting. At the bar, Sarah polished glasses, her curiosity growing. Miguel, she whispered as he passed, don't you think this is strange? He's way too calm about how you're treating him. Probably doesn't even realize I'm insulting him, Miguel replied, selecting a bottle of Sauternes with a smirk. These tech guys live in their own little bubbles. In the kitchen, Chef Ost muttered in French as he prepared the souffle. They don't understand haute cuisine. When Miguel returned to Musk's table, he placed a glass of golden wine down with exaggerated care. This is Chateau Sudurat. Though you might find it a bit complex. Musk picked up the glass and examined it with genuine interest. Interesting choice. What made you pick a Sauternes? The question, asked with clear knowledge of wine, made Miguel falter for a second. It's the traditional pairing for souffle, he said, quickly regaining his sarcastic tone. Though I suppose you'd prefer a Coke. At a nearby table, a group of tech executives exchanged knowing glances. One of them discreetly pulled out his phone, typing something. The night was far from over, and Miguel had no idea how deeply the story of Table 15 would ripple through his life and the world. One of the executives seated near the bar called out to Sarah. Is that waiter always like this with customers? Sarah, wiping down glasses, shook her head. Miguel is usually very professional. Something about that guy at table 15 has him especially inspired tonight. Meanwhile, Musk had pulled out his phone again. Notifications from Twitter buzzed about Tesla's latest controversy, but he ignored them, opening a voice recording app instead. Mind if I record some notes? Musk asked as Miguel returned to check on the souffle. The atmosphere here is inspiring. Miguel smirked. Oh, are you working on the next big app? Another revolutionary social network? Or maybe something blockchain related? His voice dripped with sarcasm. Musk suppressed a smile as he adjusted his phone on the table. Something like that. It's always helpful to document interesting experiences. In the kitchen, Chef Ost was adding the finishing touches to the soufflé when Thomas approached, his expression uneasy. Ost, doesn't the customer at table 15 look familiar to you? The chef paused, peering at Musk through the small service window. Main tenant K2 Ludis. There is something familiar about him, but it can't be who I'm thinking of. That man wouldn't dine alone. Or dress like that. Just then, Miguel entered the kitchen to collect the soufflé, catching the tail end of their conversation. What are you two staring at? He asked, adjusting his apron. Miguel, Thomas began carefully, have you noticed anything particular about the customer at table 15? Other than his complete lack of class and his pretense at being sophisticated? Miguel scoffed, taking the plate. He's your typical Silicon Valley wannabe, thinking he can buy refinement with a credit card. Thomas opened his mouth to say more, but Miguel had already walked off, heading to Musk's table with the soufflé. On his way, Sarah intercepted him, her face pale. Miguel, she whispered urgently, one of the executives at table 6 just showed me something on his phone. I think you need to see. Not now, Sarah, Miguel cut her off. I need to serve the soufflé before it deflates. Reaching Musk's table, Miguel placed the dessert down with an exaggerated flourish. Your soufflé, sir. Do you need me to explain how to eat it? It's a bit more sophisticated than a Starbucks brownie. Musk, who had been discreetly recording on his phone, tilted it slightly to capture the moment. Please, enlighten me. I'm always eager to learn. Once again, the response was devoid of the irritation Miguel had expected. If anything, Musk seemed even more amused. For the first time, Miguel faltered. At the bar, Sarah was hyperventilating after seeing what the executive had shown her on his phone. Thomas noticed her distress and quickly approached. Sarah, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. She pointed toward table 15, her hand trembling. Thomas, do you know who that customer is? Before Thomas could respond, Miguel returned to the bar, shaking his head in disbelief. Can you believe that guy just asked me about the physics of why a soufflé rises? Like he actually cares about the science behind it. Miguel, Sarah interrupted, her voice urgent, there's something you really need to. But Miguel was already heading back to Musk's table with another glass of wine. On his way, he stopped briefly at the service station to check his phone. 3 messages from his sister lit up the screen. Miguel, are you watching the news? Answer me. This is important. Please tell me you're not being yourself tonight. He ignored the texts, assuming it was some family drama, and continued to Musk's table. You know, Miguel began as he poured the wine, it's refreshing to see someone pretending to care so much about gastronomy. Most tech guys who come here just want to show off how much they can spend. Musk took a sip of the wine, steadying Miguel over the rim of his glass. And what makes you so sure I'm pretending? Oh, please, Miguel scoffed, rolling his eyes. I've been in this business for 15 years. I can spot the difference between someone who genuinely appreciates fine dining and someone trying to keep up appearances. The way you hold your utensils, the way you pronounce French names, the fact that you asked for ketchup with a prime steak, it all screams new money trying to fit in. At nearby tables, diners held their breath, caught between disbelief and morbid fascination. The group of tech executives had stopped pretending they weren't eavesdropping. One discreetly held his phone, recording the interaction. 15 years is a long time, Musk said thoughtfully, adjusting his phone on the table. You must have seen all kinds of customers. Oh, absolutely, Miguel replied, oblivious to Sarah's desperate attempts to catch his attention. But you tech guys are my favorite category. Always so sure you're changing the world with your apps and cryptocurrencies. Musk tilted his head, genuinely intrigued. And what do you think about electric cars? Miguel couldn't suppress a laugh. Like Tesla? Please. Elon Musk is just another billionaire playing Tony Stark. He paused for dramatic effect. At least he knows how to dress appropriately for dinner. Unlike. The words caught in Miguel's throat. The amused expression on his customer's face. The offhand mention of Tesla. The phone angled just so on the table. A chill ran down his spine. At the bar, Sarah buried her face in her hands, unable to watch the disaster unfold any further. Thomas had started walking toward table 15 but stopped in his tracks, realizing Miguel was finally putting the pieces together. Miguel stammered, his mind racing through every sarcastic remark he'd made that evening. Musk raised a hand, cutting him off before he could stumble out an apology. You were saying something about Tony Stark? Miguel's face drained of color. His throat was so dry he could barely speak. I didn't. I never imagined that the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX might dine alone in jeans? Musk finished, a faint smile playing on his lips as he adjusted his phone one last time. The restaurant clock read 11:15 p.m. The night that had begun with a waiter's arrogance was about to take a turn that no one in the room would forget. The silence that followed was deafening. The few remaining diners had stopped pretending not to eavesdrop. The tech executives at the nearby table had their phones recording openly now. Even Chef Aust had peeked out from the kitchen, his white hat barely visible through the service window. Miguel stood frozen, the weight of his actions crashing down like an avalanche in slow motion. Sarah appeared beside Miguel, practically materializing out of nowhere. Mr. Musk, please accept our sincerest apologies. Miguel is usually very professional, and... Is he? Musk interrupted, his tone genuinely curious. Because in the past 2 hours, I've seen something entirely different. Fascinating, I must admit. Thomas, the manager, finally mustered the courage to approach the table, his forehead glistening with sweat. Mr. Musk, as the manager of Lou Jardin, I want to express our deepest. You know what's most interesting? Musk interrupted again, this time addressing Miguel and completely ignoring Thomas's attempts at an apology. It's that this has been the most honest conversation I've had in weeks. No flattery, no hidden agendas, just brutal honesty. Miguel blinked, confused. His brain was still struggling to process the situation. You're not angry. Angry? Musk let out a small laugh. I've been recording every interaction. It's refreshing to meet someone who says exactly what they think, even if it's not particularly diplomatic. At the executives' table, one of them whispered to his companions, classic Elon, turning a disaster into a social study opportunity. Chef August had abandoned any pretense of being busy in the kitchen and now stood in the doorway, his mustache quivering with excitement. Mon Dieu! I have Elon Musk critiquing my soufflé. About that, Miguel began, recalling his earlier snarky comments and feeling a fresh wave of shame. Oh, it's delicious, Musk remarked, taking another bite. Though I must admit, ketchup would have been an interesting addition. The joke elicited a nervous giggle from Sarah, which she immediately tried to stifle with a cough. Miguel, on the other hand, felt the world spinning around him. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket, likely his sister frantically trying to warn him about who his customer was. Mr. Musk, Thomas tried again, his voice cracking slightly. Please allow us to make amends in some way. Dinner is on the house, and miss the pleasure of using my card? Musk interrupted, pulling out the sleek black card he'd shown earlier. After all those comments about my supposed budget limits? That would be anticlimactic, don't you think? Hearing his name from Musk's lips sent a shiver down Miguel's spine. Sir, about my comments on Tesla and, well, about you. You mean the ones about me being a billionaire playing Tony Stark? Musk asked, amused. You're not the first to make that comparison. Though people don't usually say it to my face. At least not while serving wine. The executives at the nearby table had started live streaming openly now, their phones angled toward the scene. Within hours, the story would go viral. Musk's handling of the situation was quintessentially his, unconventional, provocative, and strangely captivating. You know, Musk continued, leaning forward slightly, brutal honesty is a rare quality these days. Especially in my world, where everyone's so concerned with saying the right thing, not offending, and keeping up appearances. Miguel shifted uncomfortably, aware that every word and gesture was being recorded, not just by Musk's phone but by multiple devices now pointed in his direction. Which brings me to a question, Musk said, his eyes glinting with curiosity. Why did you choose to be so direct with me tonight? The question caught Miguel off guard. He had expected anger, a threat of dismissal, or even a lawsuit, not this surreal conversation about authenticity. Miguel hesitated, glancing around. His co-workers' expectant faces and the phones recording his every move only heightened the pressure. I guess I just got tired of the pretense. Of people coming here, pretending to be something they're not, trying to impress. And when I saw you, with your jeans and worn sweater, I assumed that I was another pretentious techie trying to show off. Musk finished for him. His expression softened slightly. The irony is delicious, isn't it? A clap of thunder echoed in the distance, as if the weather itself wanted to add drama to the moment. Rain began softly tapping against the restaurant's windows. For what it's worth, Miguel added with a nervous smile, your French pronunciations really are terrible. Musk's laugh rang out, breaking the tension that had gripped the restaurant. Even Thomas, who had been on the verge of a nervous breakdown, allowed himself a small smile. Miguel, Musk said, picking up his phone, you've provided the most authentic material I've recorded in months. The question is, what should I do with it? Miguel's heart stopped. This night could end in 1,000 different ways, not all of them good. But something about Musk's expression suggested this story might take an unexpected turn. The night wasn't over. Midnight was drawing near at Le Jardin, and the electrifying atmosphere had given way to a different tension. Miguel, still standing by Musk's table, felt the weight of every second as the magnitude of what had unfolded sank in. Miguel, Thomas's voice cut through the silence. I think you should take your break now. But Musk raised a hand. Actually, I'd like Miguel to stay. I have a few more questions. Sarah, watching nervously from the bar, approached with a new bottle of wine. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured. Mr. Musk, perhaps you'd prefer something more exclusive from our cellar? This is perfect, Musk replied, not taking his eyes off Miguel. So, tell me more about your thoughts on billionaires playing Tony Stark. Miguel felt his throat tighten. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but the messages no longer mattered. His mind wandered to his sick mother, the unpaid medical bills, his sister in college. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words stuck. You know, Musk continued, glancing at his phone, it's fascinating how people's behavior changes when they realize who I am. But you were brutally honest all night. Until exactly, he checked his phone, 12 minutes ago. In the kitchen, Chef Auguste had begun nervously preparing more desserts, his way of coping with stress. Sacre bleu, he muttered, furiously whipping cream. At the executives' table, the live streams continued, their audiences growing by the minute as the drama unfolded in real time. Mr. Musk, Thomas tried again, his voice desperate. I understand Miguel's behavior was inappropriate. But he has a difficult family situation. His mother is ill and... Is that true? Musk interrupted, his expression subtly shifting. Miguel nodded slowly. Pancreatic cancer. The insurance, it doesn't cover all the treatments. And yet, Musk said, reviewing the recordings again, you suggested I order the soup because it was more accessible. The irony is fascinating. Sarah appeared with a chair. Miguel, sit down before you pass out. I can't sit at a customer's table, Miguel protested weakly, his training kicking in even amidst the chaos. I think we're past formalities, Musk replied with a smile. Sit. Miguel sank into the chair, his legs finally giving out. The restaurant was practically empty now, save for the executives still documenting everything and a few staff members pretending to work while watching. Your comment about Tesla was particularly interesting, Musk continued, playing a portion of the recording. Do you really think I'm just playing at being innovative? Not really, Miguel admitted. It's just that, when you've served tables for 15 years, you see a lot of pretense. Especially in San Francisco. Everyone thinks they're changing the world with the next big app or startup. And Tesla isn't changing the world? It is, Miguel said, regaining some of his earlier honesty. But from where I stand, electric cars are something I'll never be able to afford. My 2005 Honda Civic barely works, but it's all I can manage while helping my mom and sister. Musk leaned back in his chair, studying Miguel with renewed interest. Go on. It's like living in two different worlds. Miguel's words started to flow, his frustration spilling out. I serve dinners that cost more than my monthly salary to people who talk about changing the world, while I can't even pay my mom's medical bills. It's not that I don't value innovation. It's just frustrating. Musk listened carefully. And tonight, Miguel continued, when I saw someone who seemed like they were pretending to belong to that world, I took it out on you. It was unprofessional and unfair. Honest, though, Musk interrupted, almost amused. Do you know how rare it is for someone to tell me exactly what they think? No filters, no agenda? Thomas, who had been holding his breath, finally spoke. Mr. Musk, I understand you value honesty, but Miguel's behavior tonight was exactly what I needed, Musk cut in. Think of it as an impromptu social experiment. How many CEOs know what everyday people really think of them? Not analysts, not the media, someone who struggles to make ends meet. At the nearby table, a group of executives who had been streaming the confrontation suddenly stopped. They realized this wasn't just a viral moment, it was something much deeper. Musk's tone shifted, becoming more serious. That said, actions have consequences. Miguel, you've given me a unique perspective tonight, but your judgment was questionable. Miguel's heart sank. Here it was, the firing, the public humiliation, the end of his ability to support his family. He lowered his head and whispered, I understand, sir. I accept whatever punishment there is. Just, please don't fire me. My mom depends on my health insurance. Musk picked up his phone and played a recording of one of Miguel's earlier comments. At least he knows how to dress for dinner, Miguel had said. Musk chuckled. The irony is, I dressed like this tonight hoping for a quiet meal, no cameras, no spectacle. Instead, I got something far more interesting. Sarah, who had been standing nearby, finally broke the silence. So, you're not going to fire him? Fire him? Musk looked genuinely surprised. Why would I fire someone who's not afraid to tell the truth? Miguel blinked, confused. I don't understand. Your problem isn't honesty, Musk explained. It's judgment, knowing when and how to be honest. But honesty itself? That's priceless. I can't buy that with all my billions. Miguel felt tears welling up. The tension, the fear, the adrenaline, it was all catching up to him. But, Musk continued, holding up his phone, these recordings are compromising. So, the question is, what should I do with them? The room fell silent. The restaurant staff held their breath, waiting for Musk's verdict. The clock struck 12:15 a.m., and the rain outside intensified, as if nature itself was providing the perfect soundtrack. Musk played another snippet. Do you know what's most interesting about these recordings, Miguel? It's not just your comments about me. It's your perspective on the tech world, on inequality, on innovation, all from someone caught between those worlds. Sarah returned with a fresh round of coffee. Her hands were steady now. Mr. Musk, may I ask, why were you recording in the first place? Instinct, Musk replied, taking the cup. When Miguel made his first comment about my limited budget, something told me this night would be educational. The executives at the nearby table began murmuring. One of them, a woman in an elegant suit, spoke up. Mr. Musk, this is exactly the kind of perspective Silicon Valley needs. The tech bubble has isolated us from reality. Miguel shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't trying to make a statement. The best insights are rarely intentional, Musk said with a small smile. Then, his tone shifted again. Let's talk about your personal situation. You mentioned your mother. How much does her treatment cost? Miguel hesitated, caught off guard. About $12,000 a month. Insurance covers some of it, but we still need $8,000 extra. And your sister? She's in college. Partial scholarship, Miguel explained. I work double shifts on weekends to help cover the rest. Chef Ost emerged from the kitchen, setting a plate of macarons on the table. Pour vous, Miguel, he said softly. I never knew. No one did, Miguel replied, cutting him off. I didn't want pity. I'd rather deal with sarcastic comments about pretentious millionaires, he added, flashing a nervous smile at Musk. Musk laughed lightly and played another snippet. He probably has a revolutionary startup in his garage, Miguel had said. The irony isn't lost on me, Miguel admitted, blushing. Especially since Tesla literally started in a garage. True, Musk replied. Though probably with better funding than your 2005 Honda Civic. The remark drew nervous laughter from the staff and even a faint smile from Thomas, who had been tense all night. Mr. Musk, Thomas began, I understand you appreciate Miguel's honesty, but his behavior tonight was inappropriate. Unprofessional, Musk finished for him. Yes. But it was also real. And reality is something I don't get enough of. Miguel caught his reflection in an empty wine glass. The arrogant waiter he had been earlier that night was gone. What remained was someone smaller, more vulnerable, but perhaps more authentic. If I could go back, Miguel began, I'd. Would you change anything? Musk interrupted. Would you be more flattering? More fake? Miguel hesitated. The executives leaned in, sensing the weight of his answer. No, Miguel said at last. I'd be more respectful in how I said it. But the frustration, the inequality, the feeling of living in two worlds, that's real. Musk nodded slowly, as if Miguel had passed some kind of test. What if I told you these recordings could start something bigger? Bigger? Miguel frowned. Like what? Like a conversation Silicon Valley needs to hear, Musk replied. A raw, unfiltered perspective on the gap between technological innovation and everyday life. The executives murmured with interest. Sarah almost spilled her coffee. But first, Musk added, we need to address some practical matters, like your mother's treatment. Miguel's heart raced. Mr. Musk, I wasn't trying to. I know, Musk said, cutting him off. That's what makes it genuine. You weren't asking for help. You were just being honest, even if it bordered on insubordination. The rain began to let up, as if even the weather wanted to hear what came next. The clock struck 1 a.m., and Miguel's life was about to take an unexpected turn. But that moment of revelation, the one that would change everything, would have to wait for the next chapter. The tension in Lottie Jardin grew heavier as everyone held their breath, waiting to see how this extraordinary night would end. The early hours of the morning settled over the restaurant, and the decision that would shape Miguel's future hung in the air. The clock read 1:15 a.m., and not a single soul had left the room, as if some invisible spell held them there, awaiting the conclusion. Before we move forward, Musk said, scrolling through his phone, I'd like to replay something specific from tonight. Miguel's voice echoed through the silent restaurant. In my position, people are usually fake. You treated me like any other customer, though not in the best way. It's fascinating, Musk continued, how people's behavior changes when they know who I am. Investors, employees, even waiters, everyone has a mask ready. Thomas cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Musk, if I could just. Do you know how many people work directly under me at Tesla? Musk interrupted, ignoring the manager. Miguel blinked, caught off guard. Thousands? Thousands, Musk confirmed. And do you know how many of them dare to tell me when I'm wrong? Sarah, still nearby with a coffee pot, murmured, after tonight, probably one fewer. On the contrary, Musk replied with a small smile. Tonight has made me think about something important. Miguel, how long have you worked in the service industry? 15 years, sir. 15 years observing Silicon Valley's elite, Musk mused. 15 years overhearing their conversations, watching their behavior, and seeing the disconnect between their grand visions and everyday reality. At the nearby table, the executive shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the truth in his words. And in all that time, Musk continued, you've developed a unique perspective, one that isn't afraid to point out contradictions, even if it's not always diplomatic. Miguel swallowed hard. Mr. Musk, about that. My communications team at Tesla, Musk interrupted, is full of brilliant professionals, PR experts, media strategists, image consultants. All highly qualified, and all terribly careful not to offend. Chef Ost emerged again from the kitchen, his curiosity no longer containable. Are you saying what I think you're saying? What I need, Musk said, ignoring the interruption, isn't more people telling me what I want to hear. I need someone who isn't afraid to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. A profound silence fell over the restaurant, so deep that even the rain outside seemed to pause. Mr. Musk, one of the executives ventured cautiously. Are you considering? Miguel? Musk leaned forward. What would you say if I offered you a job? The sound of a glass breaking echoed through the room as Sarah dropped the one she had been cleaning. A job? Miguel stammered, barely processing the words. At Tesla, Musk confirmed. On my communications team. Not to polish messages or manage PR, but to give me the raw, honest perspective you've shown tonight. Thomas staggered, steadying himself on a nearby chair. But, he insulted you. Mocked you all night. Exactly, Musk replied. And in doing so, he offered more insights into public perception of Tesla and technology than 6 months of focus groups ever could. Miguel looked around, as if expecting someone to announce this was all a joke. But I don't know anything about corporate communications. That's the point, Musk said. I don't need another communications expert. I need someone who understands the disconnect between Silicon Valley and the real world, someone who's lived that disconnect for 15 years. The executives at the nearby table began taking notes, recognizing the brilliance in Musk's unconventional offer. The salary, Musk added, would be significantly higher than what you earn here, enough to cover your mother's treatment and your sister's education. Tears welled up in Miguel's eyes. I don't know what to say. Say what you really think, Musk replied. As you've been doing all night. Miguel took a deep breath. Honestly? I think you're crazy. Laughter erupted in the restaurant, breaking the tension that had been building for hours. Probably, Musk admitted. But that kind of madness has gotten us pretty far. So, what do you say? Miguel hesitated. What if I mess everything up? I'm not exactly known for my tact. Oh, you'll mess things up sometimes, Musk said with a grin. But I'd rather have someone fail honestly than succeed dishonestly. Sarah, who had been holding back tears, finally let out a sob. This is like a Hallmark movie, but with billionaires and sarcastic waiters. Musk extended his hand. Do we have a deal? Miguel stared at the outstretched hand, then at his coworkers, who watched with a mix of awe and joy. He thought of his mother, the medical bills, and his sister struggling to stay in college. One condition, he said at last. Musk raised an eyebrow. What's that? That you let me keep being honest, even when it's uncomfortable. Musk smiled. Miguel, that's not a condition. That's exactly why I'm hiring you. Their hands clasped, and spontaneous applause broke out in the restaurant. Chef Ost began uncorking bottles of champagne, while Thomas finally relaxed, realizing his restaurant wouldn't face a lawsuit after all. You know what's ironic? Sarah said as she poured champagne. Your worst night as a waiter turned out to be the best night of your life. Miguel looked around at the smiling faces of his soon-to-be former co-workers, the executives still documenting the scene, and Elon Musk, calmly sipping a glass of champagne. Raising his glass, Miguel said, the last time I serve a table, here's my advice, treat everyone with respect, not because they might be disguised millionaires, but because it's the right thing to do. Though in my case, being a jerk somehow landed me a better job. Laughter and toasts filled the room as the night stretched on. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the first rays of dawn peeked over the San Francisco skyline. A week later, Miguel attended his first meeting at Tesla, earning a salary that not only covered his mother's treatment, but also secured his sister's education. His first task? Reviewing a draft press release and giving his unfiltered opinion, no filters, no pretense. Back at Lottie Jardin, the remaining guests shared stories and laughter over an impromptu breakfast prepared by Chef Ost. You know what's the funniest part? Sarah said, pouring coffee. All those customers who tried impressing Miguel with their wine knowledge over the years. And he ends up getting a job at Tesla by doing the exact opposite. Miguel, now more relaxed but still processing the night's whirlwind events, chuckled. I guess I should update my LinkedIn. How about, from critiquing billionaires to working for one? I prefer brutal honesty specialist, Musk suggested, still seated and surprisingly at ease in the now casual atmosphere. Nearby, the executives who had witnessed the entire night were finally preparing to leave. One approached the table. Mr. Musk, the executive began, this is going to change how many companies think about honest feedback. May I quote you in my next conference? Go ahead, Musk replied, his tone light. But make sure you mention that the ketchup with the steak was the tipping point. Thomas, who had been crunching numbers in his office, returned looking bewildered. Mr. Musk, about the bill. Charge it as usual, Musk interrupted, waving a hand. And include a generous tip for Miguel. Consider it his last service. Speaking of service, Chef Ost interjected, stepping forward. Miguel, mon ami, perhaps you could put in a good word for us at Tesla, for corporate events? Ost, Miguel replied with a sly grin, after the way I treated your most important customer, I think you owe me a few favors. The room erupted in laughter as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Miguel's phone buzzed incessantly, filled with dozens of unread messages from his family. He stared at it, a mixture of joy and disbelief crossing his face. I think I should call my mom, he said softly, his voice cracking. Use my office, Thomas offered, gesturing down the hall. And, Miguel. I'm sorry for all the times I scolded you for being too direct with customers. Clearly, you knew something I didn't. As Miguel disappeared to make the most important call of his life, Musk turned to the remaining staff. Do you know why I really hired him? He asked, staring into the last drops of his coffee. Everyone leaned in, waiting. Not just for his honesty, Musk said, his voice quieter now. It's his ability to see through pretension. In a world where everyone is trying to be something they're not, someone who can point out the truth, especially when it's uncomfortable, is invaluable. Sarah, clearing away the champagne glasses, held up her phone. What are you going to do with the recordings? I'll keep them, Musk replied with a faint smile. As a reminder that sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. And maybe someday, when Miguel is presenting in a boardroom, I'll play them, just to see his reaction. In Thomas's office, Miguel finished telling his mother the news. Tears streamed down his face as he listened to her joyful sobs on the other end of the line. Mom, he said through his own tears, you won't have to worry about the bills anymore. And Maria? She can finish college. Everything's going to be okay. When he returned to the dining room, he noticed someone had improvised a sign. From waiter to executive, a Silicon Valley tale. Miguel shook his head with a laugh. That's a bit much. Oh, you haven't seen anything yet, Musk quipped. Wait until the media gets wind of this. Waiter insults Elon Musk and lands Tesla job. The headlines write themselves. About that, Thomas interjected nervously. Should we prepare a press release? Let it be, Musk replied, shaking his head. Some stories are better told naturally. Besides, he added, glancing at Miguel, I think my new communications advisor would prefer to keep it authentic. The morning shift employees arrived, bewildered to find an impromptu celebration still in progress. Chef Ost handed Miguel a small package. Under your chose, he said proudly. The recipe for my soufflé, for when you need to impress at corporate dinners. Thanks, Chef, Miguel said, grinning. Though I think my way of impressing people is a little different now. As Musk prepared to leave, he paused beside Miguel. First meeting, Monday at 9. And Miguel, keep that brutal honesty. Just, maybe tone down the comments on my French pronunciation. Miguel grinned. No promises. After all, you hired me for my candor. Musk chuckled. Fair point. And so, as the San Francisco sun climbed high into a clear sky, the tale of the waiter who dared to be brutally honest with the world's richest man came to a close, or, perhaps, a true beginning. Because sometimes, in the most unexpected places and the most improbable ways, brutal honesty can open doors you never knew existed, even if it includes suggesting ketchup for a $120 steak.